This article refers to the historicist interpretation of the book of Revelation. It may not be well known amongst Christians, but there are four standard interpretations of the book of Revelation. The preterist puts the book of Revelation the first sort of 40 or 50 years of the church's history. The historicist maps out the book of Revelation as a continuous fulfillment of prophecy over 2,000 years. The futurist says that the book of Revelation will be fulfilled in the last 7 years of human history prior to the second coming. And then you have what you might call the idealist, who doesn't say that we can interpret the book of Revelation, rather we just take it as a pattern of how good triumphs over evil. So those are the four interpretations. I'm going to major here on the historicist. It doesn't invalidate the idealist or the futurist position. They could still be true or have elements of validity about them. But I think the historicist is the most interesting of these interpretations because it was the one that the reformers used from the time of the Reformation until about 1850, when there was a shift over to the futurist position. And the central feature of the historicist position is that the book of Revelation is about the apostasy, as it were, of the church in the Middle Ages and to some extent in the period of history from the Christianization of Rome through to the Dark Ages. And there is certainly a sense in which you find this in the New Testament writers, a great fear that once they die, there will be a turning away from the simple truth of the gospel into something that becomes very clerical, very hierarchical, and very full of instructions and rules. And that's what becomes the case. The medieval church becomes extraordinarily archaic in the way it produces a form of Christianity that seems quite divorced from the original gospel. And so the reformers took the book of Revelation as being God's blueprint for showing how this was going to happen and how he was going to deal with it. And certainly, as I would hope, if you read the article, you would see there's a lot of evidence for suggesting that's a very valid way of doing so. Interestingly, if you do take the historicist position, what you come up with is the feature that by the time we reach now, all the prophecies have been fulfilled, almost all. And you could argue that therefore we're now in literally the last days, with no more significant prophecies yet to be fulfilled. And some commentators would suggest that we are in the last days. Now, there could be a second fulfillment of the book of Revelation, and that the futurists may be correct in what they're saying. So this doesn't invalidate the futurist position. But what it does say is that we have incredible testimony to God using prophecy throughout the whole book of Revelation to show that he knew what was going to happen to the church, and he had prophesied it beforehand, and therefore the church was able and equipped to undertake the Reformation that was needed in the 16th century. And think about it, the reformers in the 16th century were having to go against the church that had been established for over 1,000 years. They had to believe they were doing God's will, especially as the reformers wanted to return the church back to God's word. And if they're going to do that, they're going to have to have some justification for saying that God was actually in what they were doing. And they saw in the book of Revelation such a justification. Well, thank you for listening.